Dude, check it out. What do we talk about? Consolidation at the 236 was likely going to lead to a break above the 236. That is exactly what we got. This just solidifies the bullish case for Bitcoin. And I believe what's going on right now is we're just forming a higher high. That's what this part of the cycle is right now. We got our low back in November, and we've been uptrending into this significant higher high, breaking above key levels of resistance. We are now closing potentially a weekly candle above one of the most important levels of resistance. So this higher high is being established with some great conviction. But what I'm saying about the higher high is what comes next. Higher low. Now, obviously, there's no telling how high this higher high can go, but I can tell you that a higher low is due at some point. The good news is there's a really strong chance that the higher low is just going to solidify this uptrend even more. I just highly doubt that we're going to see Bitcoin break below any of these major levels. Like, I don't think it's going to break below the March 6th low. You know, I that seems unlikely to me because you've already broken above these key levels. Like, you broke above the price from August 2022. That was really the key moment where we could say that the bottom of Bitcoin was in, really, when you broke above this price. And now we're way above it. I just think that we have to establish that higher low to really solidify the uptrend at this point. If you look at the S&P 500, you see something similar taking shape. So we see the higher low form here. After a higher high back from January 30th, we should expect to see the market form a higher high here if this uptrend is going to continue, which I believe is very likely at this point. Now, why do I believe it's likely for the uptrend to continue here? It's really because of the weakness in the dollar. I mean, it's really simple. The dollar has now broken below the low from January 30th, which, as we just discussed, that was the high in the stock market, right? So the high in the stock market was the low on the DXY. The DXY breaks that low point from January 30th, and that implies that the DXY has no support anywhere around here. This is not a support level. I did talk about how this trend line that I've drawn here, that would have been support. It's sort of acted as support a few times, but it turned out to be weak support. It's not keeping the dollar high. In fact, it's keeping the dollar low, because if you look at this weekly candle, look how it closed. It wicked above, but ultimately closed well below that trend line, and obviously well below the Fibonacci level there. That's confluent with that trend line. So that goes back to the argument that I made last week, which is like, I really think the DXY is unlikely to find support anywhere above the 99 level. So it's really sort of heading into that golden pocket area of the inverse Fibonacci, the golden pocket being between the 618 and the 786. So all of this area here seems to be the likely target for the DXY. And obviously that's massive upside for the equities and the crypto markets in the near term. But it's hard to say what's going to happen this week. I think what's likely going on here is we're forming, a higher high leading into the May 3rd Federal Reserve meeting. So I think that's sort of the approximate timeline, assuming no black swan takes place. And of course, if a black swan does take place, then that could really just eliminate this uptrend. So you would think that if a black swan is going to take place, it's going to happen like this coming week, like very soon, because it would likely snuff out the potential of a higher high here, right? So it would prevent the S&P from forming that uptrend, right? But the thing is Bitcoin has already solidified the higher high uptrend scenario, right? I mean, Bitcoin's at a local high right now. There's no price higher than this except if you go back to literally May 2022 was the last time you had price higher than where it is now. That's almost a year ago. So it's like the market, as we've talked about, it sees into the future. It sees things before they happen. Crypto is telling us that it's unlikely that some black swan event is going to occur anytime soon because it's bullish, right? That's the bottom line. Like, a paradigm shifting, financial, just disaster doesn't seem like it's immediately over the horizon at this point. I feel like we've made it through that part of the cycle. And a lot of that was happening here at the bottom. And that makes complete sense. Markets typically bottom on horrifically bad news. If you just isolate crypto, it's hard to say that the market is anticipating any bad news at this point. Obviously, a sell-off would make sense because you're going to establish that higher low, but that may be the result of the Federal Reserve coming out on May 3rd and saying, oh, yeah, we're going to hike more, right? That's like the only thing that could really push prices back in the market. But ultimately, that can be good in the long term. That can solidify that the market has more headroom ahead of it if the Fed is able to continue to raise rates because there isn't some other crisis that's preventing them from raising rates, right? The Fed won't raise rates in a crisis environment. That's the point. So if they are raising rates, it's unlikely that we're in a crisis environment. And so let's, speaking of, financials and the Fed and the crisis, let's look over the XLF. It's like, what's the XLF doing? You guys, it's bouncing. That's what I said. I literally said, like, this is probably a significant low in the XLF because markets bottom on horrifically bad news. You got the horrifically bad news of, banks basically collapsing. What is this? 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks ago. And that was potentially a major inflection point. And now you're getting the bounce in the banking sector. And once again, the markets are moving in the same direction. That's no surprise, but there was a little time there where you're thinking like, okay, is Bitcoin about to rise while the financial sector falls? It's like, no, these markets never really break apart for any significant amount of time. Really, the story is that Bitcoin was strong the whole time, and we should have known that was a sign that the rest of the equity markets would find buyers, and that's exactly what happened. So the XLF is recovering here while Bitcoin just stays strong the whole time. The S&P has really been strong the whole time too. It's been 5 weeks in a row of green candles, and now you're getting an increased volume at the height of this upside move that began 5 weeks ago. I do think that implies that we're going to hit a higher high here. And I think what makes sense is, look at this gap from August 2022, right? This is the famous Jackson Hole, market beatdown scenario. And this I feel like is where the market is headed. I think it's headed to fill this gap to establish another higher high before potentially selling off again. So in the short term, in the rest of April even, I expect this market to continue to rise here in April. And I think around the May 3rd Fed meeting, that's when we're going to get that pullback. And obviously, that's not a black swan event. That's the Fed just trying to look tough, act tough. But really, that sort of tells you that over the horizon, we almost should be anticipating smooth sailing. At least I'm saying like next 2, 3, 4 months. I think when you get into the fall equinox area, that October area, that's when we could expect the real crisis to hit. But really, my implication is the markets will probably be at a very high level by October. Like, markets are set up to remain in this bullish uptrend into October. And maybe by then, the banking crisis, rears its ugly head once again, or some other crisis. Something is happening. Something is churning under the hood that is going to be tumultuous for financial markets. I think we all can sense that, but it's our tendency to think that is right around the corner and that's what's happening next. And that's why, so many people are shorting this market thinking, it's just a bear market rally. It's like, No, this is an uptrend looking to form a higher high here. It clearly solidified that higher low. It had the chance to break the low from December, and I said if it breaks that low, then we have a different situation on our hands. But I also said, as long as we hold that low, this will be the biggest, best buying opportunity of the year. So far, that has proven to be the case. So I think that it's safe to say that this uptrend has a little bit more headroom in it if it is going to be an uptrend, which means that it would need the higher high. So I think the next phase is the higher high, and we're not there yet. So once again, I'm saying like April could end up being a bullish month for those reasons. So where do we see the next sell-off sort of originating? Well, it's originating in the bond market. So the bond market has now started to show a little bit of weakness here, right? So what I've noticed is that the bond market seems to be moving ahead of the equity markets and the crypto markets. It makes a move, and then the equities and cryptos are following it. So the perfect example here is what happened in March 2020. So look at the bond market. It peaked literally like on the day that the markets crashed in March 2020. But then what happened to the equity markets after that? They went on a psycho mega bull run, right? And then what's going on with the bond market the entire time that the equity market and crypto is going on a psycho bull run? It's falling. And then what happens? The broader markets fall, right? So I think over the past 2 years and even longer than that, the bond market has been showing us what is around the corner, right? So if the bond market is about to have another sell-off here, which would make sense if the Federal Reserve is going to raise another 25 basis points on May 3rd, then I think we could expect that to be leading a pullback that we're going to see in the broader markets, right? So maybe this is the beginning of another pullback in the bond market, where the bond market may form a higher low here before potentially breaking out of this range if we are to be in a bullish situation here. I think that it's possible that the bond market may have seen a short-term high here, and so now the equity markets, S&P 500, Bitcoin, all this stuff, they are sort of reacting to that. They're having their up move, but their up move is eventually going to get pulled back down by the bond market finding some support back down here. So there's kind of your case for the pullback. Like, you've got April shaping up to be pretty bullish, but the brick wall that's showing up is going to be the Federal Reserve meeting. But I'm saying that the Federal Reserve meeting rate hike situation is like, that's like totally harmless, compared to something that we can't anticipate, like China invading Taiwan or something like that. One of these bigger, like, international calamities, right? The Federal Reserve raising rates is not a calamity. It's not a crisis of any kind. It's just, it's just them, technically doing the right thing to fight inflation. Obviously, there are other consequences like, banks collapsing and things like this. But the fact is the banking collapse narrative it's not really prevalent at this point. And I don't think that the banks are under pressure right now, at least in the way that many people expected they would be under pressure at this point, right? I think that could return later in the year. Maybe the ugliness shows up in October and there really is a systemic issue that really messes up the financial system. But I don't think that's in the next few months. I think that's more likely to show up later in 2023. So I do think we're in a situation where you want to be buying dips, right? If you see dips, you want to be buying them. And, we're not really seeing that dip on crypto just yet. And I think, it's possible we may not see it this coming week or the next week. Like, Bitcoin could keep going up, that's for sure. Because, it broke above the most important level of resistance. It's got, 35,000 is like well within reach, and think about how frothy the market would be. Everybody would be talking about crypto. Everybody would be like, hey, did you buy Bitcoin? It's like, that's probably when you're going to see that next sell-off coming. But I think, you do have some more headroom before that shows up. And of course, that's going to correspond to a major bounce in the DXY. So think about it. It's like, where is the major resistance of the DXY? Well, it's around this 0.5 inverse Fibonacci, which is confluent with this trend line that I drew. So it seems like the DXY can and likely will fall farther before bouncing to retest this important level of resistance before then falling lower. It's clearly in a downtrend. You've got monstrously contrasting higher highs and higher lows, right? So like look at the high from October 22 to the high from February 23. It's like massive difference, right? This thing is in a significant downtrend. So you would expect that the lower low that's forming here, that lower low should be somewhat proportional to the lower high. You see what I'm saying? So yeah, basically I'm saying April could be pretty bullish. It could be pretty bullish, no doubt. It feels like it's going to be pretty bullish, and it feels like the Federal Reserve meeting on May 3rd is probably going to be the first significant selling pressure that we see on the broader markets. So yeah, that's simple. That's simple. Once again, I will congratulate the crypto holders because you just made it through another level of resistance, further solidifying the bullish case for Bitcoin. I really think 2023 is going to be a powerful year for crypto, not so specifically with Bitcoin, but I think it's the altcoin market, you know, and it's Ethereum, but it's the altcoin market in general because a lot of the altcoins are built on Ethereum. So it's like Ethereum is now going to feel the effects of the triple halving that occurred in September. You know, this major supply reduction that occurred for Ethereum that is going to affect price at some point. Maybe it's happening now. It's likely going to happen in this year, I think, because you can't go, 12 months with a major supply reduction without seeing that reflected in price. That just isn't going to happen. So think about it. September 2022, you saw the Ethereum triple halving. Maybe by fall 2023, we're going to see the full effects of that triple halving on price. Maybe it just had to take a year. Who knows? My point here is Ethereum potentially closing this weekly candle above that August high. That was a hugely important level of resistance. Altcoins are set up right now. This is huge, right? They're going to set up some kind of higher low at some point, that's for sure. Maybe we're heading to this moving average, but I mean, like, this is really shaping up to be like the miracle altcoin season that we always knew would come. We never lost faith. I mean, you only lost faith if you sold everything, right? But if you didn't, you kept the faith the whole time, and you're starting to see the signs of your faith being rewarded right here and right now. It's pretty exciting to see Ethereum breaking above that August level and potentially closing this weekly candle above that. I mean, that is like, it's I can't even put it into words, but that is monstrous, freaking monstrous. So that's all I got for you guys. All right, do it.